gesture.
Let's
He
look at
noticed
the
it and
video.
said, I just gotta make a
I'm
quick
just gonna
stop. Don't
go
worry, I'll give you a
with
discount.
family for a while and watch
Even though I was
the
drunk,
other team.
I still
So
knew something bad was going on.
yeah,
Then
if
that's when I noticed the
anything
handgun
crazy
sticking out from
happens,
his little
just
glove box next to him. By now, I was trying
make
to figure out
sure you
how
let
to
me
get out
know
of
in the
this car.
comments down below. Okay? Make sure to
At the next red
subscribe
light, I tried the door handle
to
very
see more
quietly,
of my
it wouldn't
baby
open.
brother videos.
I saw that the
So yeah,
child lock was on. From this point
hope you guys
forward,
enjoy.
my heart was racing. The man was driving us far out of the direction of my house. He must have been 2 towns over by now. I was getting desperate. I couldn't call the cops because I didn't know what this guy might do. I figured my best option would be attempting to flick the child lock switch next to him by the front seats. I had to somehow slide over to the opposite side of the back seat behind him without him noticing. This was one of the most tense moments of my life. I locked my sight on his head from the rearview mirror, making sure he wasn't looking. I very casually slid behind him. Thankfully, he didn't notice. Now came the scariest part. I had to reach for the button up front at the next red light before he could do anything. Each light we passed, I felt more and more tension build up as I was waiting for one of them to turn yellow, and eventually one finally did. He slowed the car at an intersection that would usually be busy during daylight hours. It was a perfect escape point. The car came to a stop. I knew this light wasn't very long, so I had to be quick. The car was stopped at the opposite side of the intersection, which made me feel a little better. With all of my courage, I reached my hand up to the lit up child lock button, and I must have startled him because he jumped 2 inches out from the seat. He screamed at me, and as I feared he would, he went for the gun right next to him. I was able to open the door and flee to the nearby Cadillac Escalade, where I banged on their windows asking for help. They drove off, completely avoiding me, but it didn't matter because the man in his Chevy Malibu was already gone down the block. I ran into a nearby grocery store that was open 24 hours, where I called a taxi this time. This was a very sobering experience because I don't remember being drunk at all in that store, or during the taxi ride home. I reported the driver to Uber, who said they would escalate the situation to the authorities. It wasn't until a whole week later that an officer finally showed up at my front door for some questioning. That was the end of that. I have no idea what became of that guy, but I've never used an Uber since. As a former Uber driver, I've dealt with a whole bunch of unpleasant characters, from the drunken groups of friends on Saturday nights, to the people who pretend to be handicapped to get free rides. But every so often, you may pick up somebody who can just be classified as a straight-up creep. I've picked up a few of these guys, but never one quite as bad as a guy named Tom. It was a Friday night in December, one of the coldest nights of the year. I had nothing to do, so I figured I'd do some late-night pickups. This was 2 years ago. I was 18 and had a new Honda Accord. My parents kind of spoiled me a bit. I was a very skinny 18-year-old though. That's why my dad told me to always keep a blade in my car, because you never know what kind of nuts are getting into the car. A guy named Tom popped up a couple miles away by a major shopping area. I responded to his request and started driving in that direction. I pulled up in front of the shopping center, where I saw a group of teenagers hanging out. It looked like trouble. I hoped this Tom guy wasn't part of this group. A bunch of them looked at me in my car as I slowly passed. Eventually, I just hit the gas and went further into the parking lot of the shopping center, wanting to get away from this group. I did 2 laps around the whole parking lot until I finally noticed through my left mirror somebody approaching my car from behind. I rolled down my window and called out Tom, and he called back yes. I told him to hop in. I had to repeat myself 3 times, and given that all I was saying was hop in very clearly, made the situation very weird from the start. The 4th time, he finally understood me and walked slowly around the back, getting into the seat right behind me. Usually the people I picked up would sit diagonally from me, which is what I prefer. When people sat right behind me, it just made me a little paranoid sometimes, especially when the person seemed kind of creepy. This guy was old. He had to be in his upper 40s. "Where to?" I asked him. He told me an address, which I entered into my phone. By his voice, I could tell he was a very heavy smoker. Come to think of it, my car was starting to smell like cigarettes too. The address he gave me was 10 miles away, which was fine. since it meant I'd be making more money. I tried making small talk initially, which didn't work out too well. Like if I would ask him a yes or no question, sometimes he would just mumble, and the other questions led to dry responses. I stopped talking when he completely ignored one of my questions. I was within just 5 miles. There was still 5 to go. By the 6 mile mark, things started getting uneasy in there. I was afraid to look into the rearview mirror because I was so sure that he was staring at me. I took a quick half-second glance and saw I was right. He was in fact staring at me. My body forced my foot down heavier on the gas. I wanted this ride to be over sooner. By the 8 mile mark, I started to realize we were in the middle of nowhere. We were on basically a deserted street with woods on either side and occasional buildings. I was growing suspicious now as to where this address he told me actually was. So, while driving, I dragged my finger across my phone to slide the map in the direction of the address. It seemed to lead to a dead-end street with no surrounding streets nearby. I was getting more and more nervous with each passing minute now. I shot a glance back up again at the mirror. He was still watching me. I finally summed up the courage to ask him if the address he gave me was of his house. There was silence for a few moments, and I thought he was once again going to ignore me, or possibly didn't hear me. 5 seconds later, he finally answered yes. There was less than a mile left in the drive now, still surrounded by nothing but woods with the occasional empty-looking building. I was approaching the dead-end street that the address he gave me resided on, hoping some houses would come into sight. As the street came up, I slowed down so I could get a good look of it. But nothing could be seen, just pitch blackness. I could only imagine why he wanted to get me out here alone, so far away from anybody or anything. I casually kept driving, pretending like I missed it, hoping he wouldn't notice. But he did. Instantly, he hopped out of his seat and yelled at me to turn around. Honestly, I felt like my life was on the line, so I apologized and did a quick three-point turn. As I was reapproaching the dead-end street, I dug my hands into the netting compartment on the side of my seat where I kept my blade. I very quietly flipped the blade open and held it tight in my right hand, ready to use it. I turned down the dead-end road, with my headlights now displaying just what I thought I would see. Nothing but trees on either side. I made it to the end of the road, not a single house or building on the road. I just knew something was about to go down. I was just trying to physically and mentally prepare myself for it. Suddenly he said in as soft as a voice as he probably could, "Thanks for the ride." I wasn't even thinking about money at this point. He opened his door, but before stepping out, he said, "Could you get out of the car for a second? I need help carrying my bag. I have a bad back." But he didn't have a bag. I knew he didn't. He didn't come in with one. I replied, yeah, sure, let yourself go and I'll help you in a sec." The shakiness in my voice was too obvious. What happened next, I never imagined would have happened. All of a sudden, I felt pressure on my neck. It took me at least a second before I could realize he was choking me from the back seat. Immediately, I drilled the blade into his left arm, and he screamed in pain, releasing his grip on my neck. He fell out of the car and onto the street, and I took that opportunity to turn the car around and practically floor it down the street until I returned to a busy road. I actually didn't end up calling the cops. I was just too scared to do anything but drive home. And by the time I got home, I just wanted to go to sleep and forget about it. Needless to say, I resigned from my Uber driving days after this incident.
You need to learn how to pick up your room, girl. That room of yours is a mess. You need to learn how to straighten it up. Are you going to be a pig all your life?
I was at home alone playing Call of Duty between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. During this time, I got a phone call from a random phone number, and of course, the first thing I think of is that it's just somebody who's either prank calling me or just doesn't have the right number. After I hung up, a few seconds later, I received a phone call from the same number. When this happened, I'll admit I felt a little chill run down my spine. But since I was home alone, I was thinking that if this person was just prank calling me, I could say whatever I want until either I or the person hangs up. So I answered it. I said hello in a sort of annoyed voice, but there was no response. Instead, all I heard was something that still freaks me out. I heard what sounded like a cat hissing, but in a much deeper pitch. Of course, out of surprise, I became defensively hostile. I said into the phone, "Look, buddy, if you call this number again, I'll have my friend who's a police officer track this number and arrest you." But this didn't even faze whoever was on the other end of the phone. Instead, all I got in response was disturbing low-pitched laughter. My heart dropped. "Why are you calling?" I said. Then, this is what still gives me nightmares to this day. As clear as day, in a dark, almost demonic voice, I heard,
Yeah.
"I'm just waiting for you to come
Okay,
upstairs."
fine. You can see my brother in this video. Okay, so
Without
finally see
hesitation,
the
I
reveal
ran
on my
out of the
brother's
house
face.
and ran across the street to my friend's house and
Look at
asked
that
his dad
face.
to call my
Look at
dad,
that face.
trying to explain to him what happened at the same time.
It's Donkey
My friend called
Kong!
my dad.
Watch out for
My
Donkey
friend's dad
Kong!
called the police.
Get down from there, boy!
They arrived in 5 minutes and found nothing upstairs.
Hold on, I did stop the video. Hold on.
But they did find the back door open.
Okay. Now,
I don't see anything being televised.
wait, how's that story too? Oh. Then move on to another video.
My dad used to
Comment
be
down below, please.